From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, sprinting toward a vote, hopefully. The whirlwind action here in Washington as House Republicans work furiously to get Donald Trump's one big beautiful bill to the finish line, with a potential vote taking place just hours from now, late this evening or early tomorrow morning.
But that can't happen until it gets out of the Rules Committee, which has been considering the measure for 16 hours now. And also at this hour, a meeting at the White House with holdout lawmakers from the Conservative Freedom Caucus, House Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump just wrapping up, according to CNN, amid reporting of their threats to tank the bill by refusing for it to be called up to the floor altogether, as some members take issue with the deal the Speaker struck with the SALT caucus to lift the cap to $40,000. Congressman Chip Roy equating the deal to a $350 billion buying of their votes.
We're seeing the ripple effects of Washington's indecision with weak demand at a $16 billion Treasury auction today. Stocks, bonds, and the dollar all fell amid multiple layers of market concern over a ballooning deficit and the debt. This debt ceiling date fast approaching now, and we've got reporters covering both the Hill and the White House tonight, lawmakers as well reacting to the news. When Republican Congressman, Freedom Caucus member Ralph Norman joins us just a few moments from now, we'll also hear from Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty on what happens if and when this bill passes the House. A lot to cover, and glad you're with us as we start our expanded coverage on this with Bloomberg's Erik Wasson live on Capitol Hill. How close are we, Erik, to a vote?
I think it could be tomorrow. You know, the Freedom Caucus members are pretty dug in. They were pretty pessimistic early in the day, holding an impromptu press conference to announce that they believe that this bill should probably pass next week or the week after, given the how far apart members are. The real issue here is that Freedom Caucus members are asking for things like ending green energy tax credits immediately on ongoing projects that could impact companies that have already invested, banks that have already invested in these renewable energy projects. So that's getting pushed back from moderate members, from industry, from Wall Street and Main Street. So some of the things they're asking for are not uncontroversial. Even if the president would like to end these immediately, there will be economic pains. They're trying to thread that needle. There's also an issue on Medicaid. A lot of state budgets would be impacted by a federal withdrawal of funding for Medicaid recipients. So there's pressure from state governments on more moderate members to oppose this. So we'll have to see what kind of deal they come out with when they return from the White House to Capitol Hill shortly.
All right, indeed we will, and we know you'll have it covered for us. Bloomberg's Erik Wasson live on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much. And for more, we turn now to Republican Congressman and member of the House Freedom Caucus, Ralph Norman of South Carolina, who is also live from the Hill with us here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Congressman, welcome back to Bloomberg. It's good to have you. You obviously were not at the White House along with some of your colleagues. Does that mean we should no longer consider you a holdout on this legislation? Are you prepared to vote yes, regardless of what happens from this meeting, what emerges from it?
No, first of all, I think the speaker picks who goes, and I've been in rules all day, and of course Chip was in rules too, so no, they were perfectly willing, capable of handling whatever they need to handle. No, here's where we are. Let me just tell you, from a 30,000 foot, the tax cut plan is going to be put out. In other words, we're going to get the tax cuts, and the bill, I think, will pass. Whether we get what we need, the bill will pass the Rules Committee. Now, the question is, will it pass on the floor? And it does not have the support to pass on the floor. Here's why. And it was mentioned earlier in your show. Our debt has been downgraded 3 times by 3 major agencies, Fitch, Moody's, and S&P. I don't know how much more wake-up call we need than to get our house in order. So all we're asking for is, and you mentioned the SALT provision, which is state and local property taxes. All we're asking for is, if you need to pay for any expense that you have, and the SALT caucus, the SALT provision costs the federal government. Now on the credits, solar credits. No, Mike Johnson gave me a list of everybody that was had an ongoing business that were operating. And I said, Speaker, grandfather those in. I wouldn't take their business away from them. But any new solar credits need to be weeded out. And Donald Trump campaigned on this. And when he was at our caucus meeting, he campaigned on waste and fraud and Medicaid, which is rampant. And he said, don't do the SALT provision. And all of a sudden, we thought we had an agreement, and woke up, SALT provision got everything they wanted. It was 10,000 cap, then it went to 40,000, and no offsets. And so that's the heart of the matter. Do I think this bill will pass with some modifications? Yes, we're not being unreasonable. And I will tell you this, the date that it has to pass is artificial. The Senate is going to sit on it for I don't know how long. But we would like to do what President Trump wants, and we'll try to get it done.
Well, as we watch the Rules Committee continue here, Congressman, I know you started at 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's no signs of this ending yet. I do want to get back to you. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV, that is a live view of some very tired lawmakers who just introduced a whole new panel to this conversation. I want to get back to the matter of SALT. As you just articulated, we spoke with one of the most vociferous members of the SALT caucus, Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, your colleague from New York, talking about this deal that appears to be in hand, and if the SALT caucus is unified behind it. Here's what he said.
The members of the SALT caucus, negotiated yesterday in good faith with leadership, with the administration, and we settled on something that we believe in, that we support. Obviously, we're waiting for the final details to emerge out of the Rules Committee. But obviously, we made great progress yesterday, and I feel much better about where the bill is as a result.
Well, so here we are, Congressman Norman. Some members of Congress are happy about this. Others are not. Do you believe that with this SALT deal, the bill just got worse?
Well, let me say this. Mike Lawler is a friend of mine. He's a good negotiator, but he's negotiating for his state. But here's what President Trump told him. And he called out Mike Lawler and said, look, if you get defeated because of SALT, you're going to go down anyway. And Mike is a good politician, but he's getting something for his state. I'm not getting something for South Carolina. I'm not getting a road to nowhere. We're just asking to cut expenses and get this financial house back in order for America. That's it. And root out the waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicaid. And put able, as an example, if you're an able American and just don't work, that's a problem. And get that out. If you're an illegal alien and get a government paycheck, that's a problem. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. So hopefully, after we'll find out, I'm sure Freedom Caucus will have a meeting when Chip and the group comes back. But I hope we can get together on it. And if we can't, we'll just keep working on it until we have a meeting of the minds. And I mean, it's not that complicated. We have a math problem in this country, and we got reconciliation. If we don't handle it now, I don't know when we're going to handle it. This could never be an opportunity that we have to get this to begin to get our financial house in order. If we pass this bill, it would add $4 trillion to our deficit. I'm through doing that,
Yep.
and I'm just not.
Well, and Congressman, of course, you also sit on the House Financial Services Committee. Is the U.S. Treasury market telling you right now that you are correct? Is that actually the best argument you have in changing this legislation?
Yeah, well, it's a reality. It's not an argument. It's a reality. We're going to wake up one day, and we're not going to have a market for our bonds. And if we do, it's going to be at a high interest rate, which is going to sink the markets. And banks are now beginning to slow up because they don't have confidence that we as politicians are going to make the hard choices. Every dollar in Washington, D.C. has got an advocate for it. But we've got to start saying no. And the credits, somebody make an argument why wind and solar ought to get a tax credit. Somebody make an argument why an electric car ought to get $7,000 to make a car. Let the public decide what they want. But it goes on, and it's like over 100 different subsidies that over the years have accumulated. All I'm saying is we can't afford it. It's borrowed money, and The Freedom Caucus has taken a hard stand on it, but it's common sense.
Well, based on what we've heard in this conversation, you say you're done with that, Congressman, adding to the debt and deficit. So as we speak, you're still a no vote, right?
I was going to vote for it regardless. If we had nothing out of the meeting at the White House, I was going to vote to get it out of rules, get it on the floor. And you vote for a rule. I was not going to vote for the rule if we're going to put $4 trillion a year when we had an opportunity to do so much better, and at least be deficit neutral, which is what we promised. We gave a $1.5 trillion low mark, which is a teardrop in the ocean compared to the $38 trillion that we owe. So we'll see how it goes.
Just to be clear, you vote no on the rule, or you vote no on the floor, Congressman?
I'll vote no on the rule, which it'll be killed. I mean, it won't be killed. They can bring it back up, but it does not have support now to even pass the rule the rule vote.
Doesn't sound like we're on the floor anytime soon, Congressman. We thank you for being with us in the midst of this debate. Republican Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina, we thank you. Up ahead, another heated Oval Office meeting with the president, this time of South Africa. But next, we'll continue to follow developments on the House spending package and how the Senate is preparing with Republican Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee. He's up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Sure. Always
Is that okay?
Yeah.
You want them to swallow this bill?
In some cases, they have things that I like even better. No, it always happens. There'll be some changes. But John Thune and Mike have been very closely aligned. They've been moving it up together.
President Trump yesterday on Capitol Hill acknowledging even if the House passes this tax and spending bill, some big changes are coming to the Senate's version of the plan. Thanks for being with us on Balance of Power alongside Kaylee Lines. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, and joining us now with his perspective, the Republican senator from Tennessee, Bill Hagerty. Senator, it's great to have you back. Of course, the president is right. We know that big changes will come from the Senate, and I wonder what it is you'd like to pull out of that bill. And maybe it begins with this new deal on salt.
Well, Joe and Kaylee, good to be back with you again. And I think you know I'm from a no-tax state in Tennessee. There are real concerns about salt, but I realize that President Trump broadened the tent to bring people together. So I think we're going to be negotiating on that and a number of other points. But one thing I'm going to be very clear about doing is not to try to get ahead of the people that are responsible for the negotiations here in the Senate. We met yesterday with Speaker Johnson. He was very clear that he wants to work with us. I think we'll have a good, positive working relationship and try to find a way to make certain that we're doing the absolute best we can for the American people, given the constraints that we have right now and given the implementation challenges that the executive branch faces. But let's say this, we're all moving in the same direction, and importantly, I think we're taking the message that we've got to move quickly. We need this done for the sake of the markets. We need this done for the sake of certainty. We need to see more capital investment commitments take place. That will beget more jobs, more economic activity, but it needs to happen soon. Yeah. So that sense of urgency is very real up here.
Well, on the note of timing, the Speaker of the House is gaggling with some reporters on Capitol Hill as we speak, Senator. He says the House will either vote tonight or Thursday, that they'll decide if the House votes tonight. Of course, much will depend on when or if this gets out of the Rules Committee. But to the point you were just making, Senator, about financial markets needing to see this done, is the message we're getting from financial markets that they want to see this bill passed? Because I'm looking at Treasury yields that surged 10 basis points on the day on the long end, and market strategists who are telling us left and right that this is all about fiscal concern and the deficit and the credibility of investments in U.S. Treasuries.
Well, there are a number of elements at play. One of them has to do with this tax package and extending that. Again, that'll create a much more certain environment for commitments, capital commitments, that will again beget more economic activity. That's going to be positive. There's also a focus on cutting spending. We've got to do that, but there's another aspect of this that gets far too little play. And it's not just cutting spending, it's cutting the massive overhead that we have here that comes from regulation. And if you think about what happened in the prior 4 years under the Biden administration, the estimates are that the incremental cost of the Biden regulations amounts to $1.4 trillion a year of extra compliance cost on American businesses. We're working very hard to trim those back, to streamline regulations, and that impact is going to be very real as well. It'll come to the bottom line. It will be reinvested in the economy. It will yield greater after-tax returns. All of this is going to be very positive. We just need to see it happen, and I think speed and timing are of the essence here.
I want to ask you about the Genius Act, Congressman, the future of stablecoin legislation, which is something that I know you're deeply involved with here. We're seeing a lot of pushback from some of your colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle, including your colleague from the Banking Committee, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who had this to say about stablecoin legislation that passed this week. Let's listen together.
While a strong stablecoin bill is the best possible outcome, this weak bill is worse than no bill at all. For months, many Democrats have pushed for common sense ethics provisions in this bill. Unfortunately, the final bill does nothing to rein in the president's crypto corruption. The Genius Act will accelerate Trump's corruption by supercharging the size of the stablecoin market.
She's warning of a financial meltdown triggered by crypto instability. Senator Hagerty says that stablecoins going directly into the traditional financial system with weaker safeguards than banks or investment companies must adhere to. Is she wrong?
She's absolutely wrong. And what she's doing is using a political argument to stir up controversy because she's been focused on the central bank digital currency. By its nature, this is decentralized. She's been opposed to this from the beginning. She fought this in the Banking Committee. And after close to 4 hours of debate in the Banking Committee, she was able to hold 4 Democrats on her side, but 5 came over with me and voted for us to put this out of committee. I see a lot of Democrats that see the benefit of this. And if you think about where we are today, the United States is relying on a payments system that was designed in the 70s and 80s. This is an opportunity to modernize our payment system, take us into the 21st century. We trade securities on an instantaneous basis. This would allow us to move currencies and payments at the same rate. It would be based on the U.S. dollar. That will extend dollar dominance around the world. It will actually stimulate demand for U.S. treasuries, which, given where we are right now, would be a very positive thing in the marketplace. It's going to protect consumers. These ethics concerns that Senator Warren is raising are dealt with in the Constitution. I think this is just a red herring. It's a distraction. She needs to focus on the core of this. And the fact is, I think she just doesn't like the decentralized nature of it, which is exactly why it's so powerful. And that's why so many in the American public want to see this happen and bring the United States payment system into the 21st century.
Well, we're still waiting on that full floor vote for final passage and wondering about any amendments or other pieces of legislation that could ultimately end up attached to the Genius Act. Senator, is there a risk that the Credit Card Competition Act attaches itself and risks tanking this effort?
Kayleigh, there are a number of amendments. This is a major piece of legislation that's moving onto the floor. We have a large number of amendments to sort through, and my goal is to make certain that the stablecoin legislation passes and that we avoid a situation where it gets cluttered up or bogged down with a number of amendments that could be unrelated to this. So we're going through the process right now to evaluate all of this again. We probably have well over 100 amendments to evaluate, but we will narrow this down and get through it, and I'm appreciative of the fact that Leader Thune is navigating an open process here that's going to bring us, I hope, to a very successful resolution. But we have had months to work on this bill. We've incorporated input from both sides of the aisle and a lot of input from the industry and from the executive branch. I feel very good about where we are. We've got a great work product right now, and I think we're very close to seeing it come to final closure.
All right, Senator, great to have you back on Balance of Power. Republican Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee.
Thank you, Kayleigh. Thank you, Joe.
And we have just heard from House leadership. The majority leader, Steve Scully, says the House will be voting tonight on budget reconciliation. Of course, in that vote, it's expected to be all Democratic no's, and we have a question as to how many Republican no's may be there as well. But we'll have more up ahead on how Democrats are responding to this legislation with Congresswoman Sarah Elfreth. But up next, President Trump repeats unsubstantiated claims that white Afrikaners face genocide during a heated meeting with the South African president. We'll bring you those details next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
What would it take for you to be convinced that there's no white genocide in South Africa?
Well, I can answer that for the President. It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends.
No, do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No. In many ways, I mean, one should say you are a partner of South Africa, and you are raising concerns. And these are concerns that we are willing to talk to you about.
That was President Trump in the Oval Office earlier today alongside South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Months of heated rhetoric between the U.S. and South African governments led up to today's tense meeting. And joining us now for more here on Bloomberg TV and radio is Bloomberg's Justin Sink, who helps lead our White House coverage. Justin, the president came prepared. He had printed out news articles about the death of white South Africans. He had a video montage playing on a screen in the back of the Oval Office. Was all of this by design?
I think so. I mean, the fact that they had this material ready, the South African delegation certainly felt so as we talked to them coming out of this meeting. And for the president, this is sort of a classic demonstration of sort of brute power and seizing the bully pulpit to make a point. Now, you can argue whether or not that's a good thing. On the one hand, he certainly got his case across. He was able to highlight it in a very public way that was broadcast around the world. On the other, this is now one of multiple instances in the Oval Office. We had Zelensky about a month ago. We had Justin Trudeau, he's kind of calling him governor, where foreign leaders are coming to sort of exchange diplomatic views and it's turning into this major conflict.
You start to wonder how long that's going to be the case. President Trump saying earlier, the most exciting room anywhere in the world is the Oval Office. If this kind of Trump show continues, are we in a situation where world leaders are no longer walking into the Oval Office?
I mean, it's a question that Democrats are asking today, for sure. You heard Democrats on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee say, hey, this is going to push South Africa, which is already being courted by China, further into their orbit. At the same time, I think what Trump is saying is that for too long, the U.S. has been sort of taken advantage of on the world stage. They've underpinned both the security and the trade system that everybody in the world has sort of benefited from, except, he would argue, many Americans. And so this is his chance to make that case publicly.
Complete with video presentation. We haven't seen anything quite like that in the Oval Office, have we?
I cannot remember it. I cannot remember it. We'll get the PowerPoint decks going. We'll do maybe a Bloomberg terminal up there every once in a while. Yeah.
New ground optics today, complete with the printout of the stories, Kaylee. We brought it to you live here on Bloomberg, and great to discuss with Bloomberg's Justin Sink, helping us cover the White House every day here in Washington. Justin, great to have you. Come back soon. Coming up, how Democrats are strategizing as the tax and spending package moves closer to a floor vote. That could happen as soon as tonight, based on what we're hearing from Republican leadership. We'll talk about it with Democratic Congresswoman Sarah Elfreth of Maryland next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew. Thanks for joining us. All eyes are still on Capitol Hill and likely will be for some time this evening, as House Speaker Mike Johnson continues his push to unify his caucus to put this one big, beautiful bill on the floor for a vote. Johnson telling voters a short time ago, speaking with reporters, that he is confident the tax bill will be passed by Memorial Day. More immediately, Majority Leader Steve Scalise now says the plan is to vote on this within the Budget Committee and the full floor tonight. The Rules Committee, to be clear, is what is handling this legislation right now, with a hearing that has gone on since 1 o'clock in the morning. And joining us with the latest on where this legislation stands is Bloomberg's Megan Scully. Megan, it's great to have you back. We're not serious about a floor vote tonight, are we?
That's what the Majority Leader is saying right now, and he controls the floor.
Is this part of the pressure campaign, or they really think they have the votes?
It certainly could be, but we have seen votes come to the floor, bills come to the floor and fail under the speakership of Mike Johnson. He doesn't seem to be afraid of failing very publicly and on the floor. We've seen this in a number of instances, including on the budget. So it's not anything that we would have seen from Nancy Pelosi, for instance, but this has allowed Johnson to succeed within the caucus, oddly enough, and sort of smoke out the opposition and get to the root of the issue. The problem here is that there are so many issues, and it's like playing whack-a-mole. Once you solve one, another one pops up.
Well, yeah, he solved SALT, it seems, with the $40,000 cap, made the Freedom Caucus mad, and that is why some of those holdouts were meeting with Johnson and President Trump at the White House this afternoon. Do we have a sense yet as to whether or not the president was able to convince members that he wasn't able to yesterday when he went to the Hill himself?
So the White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, said that it was a productive meeting. Johnson said as much when he came back to the Capitol. We're waiting to hear from those holdouts what they say, how they would characterize the meeting. But Joan Cayley, you guys had on Ralph Norman just moments ago, and he was not included in that White House meeting, but he remains in opposition to the bill. And just in the last few minutes, another congressman, John Rose from Tennessee, somebody nobody had their eyes on, came out in opposition to this bill over the SALT deduction.
And another mole pops up in the game. Bloomberg's Megan Scully, thank you so much. Megan and her team, of course, will be continuing to cover this throughout the evening. And for more now, specifically on how Democrats are responding to all of this, we go to Capitol Hill, where joining us live is Democratic Congresswoman Sarah Elfreth of Maryland. Congresswoman, thanks for being here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Obviously, none of us can know for sure if you all will be voting on this tonight or what the outcome of that vote will be. But the argument Republicans consistently make is if this does not ultimately pass, Americans will face a massive tax hike. What is worse, not extending the 2017 tax cuts and hitting people's wallets, or considering what will happen to those who may be reliant on Medicaid benefits and could face cuts from this legislation?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I am well prepared to sleep on my office couch tonight if that's what I have to do to vote no. Be here and vote no on this terrible bill. It's certainly a challenge to build a coalition, and governing is hard. At the same time, I can't vote for anything that's going to cut health coverage for hundreds of thousands of people in my district, the most vulnerable folks in our district, not just for Medicaid, which we've been talking about for months now, but we just learned a few hours ago CBO has scored what they believe the bill could be, and it shows the same bill will trigger a $500 billion cut to Medicare. So I'm a hard no.
You're a hard no, but you're also introducing two amendments to the Rules Committee, Congresswoman, that has been in hearing since 1 o'clock in the morning. I know you're slated to be on a panel a bit later today. These two amendments, including one on military readiness. Is this an effort to slow this hearing, to slow the process, to have a conversation, or to actually change the contents of this bill?
Well, I'm certainly introducing my amendments, and in all seriousness, they're the same amendments that I attempted to introduce successfully in the two committees on which I serve. But this is about a discussion about policy, and I serve on the Armed Services Committee. This bill proposes a $150 billion increase to our military spending, and many of the priorities I share. But frankly, I don't trust Secretary Higgs with $150, let alone $150 billion. And again, it does not address some of the readiness issues that concern me, which is why I'm submitting these amendments to the Rules Committee, hopefully in about an hour.
Well, when we consider the Armed Services Committee and the leadership of the Pentagon, we, of course, learned officially from the U.S. today that the Pentagon, the Defense Department, is going to accept that $400 million jet from Qatar to use as Air Force One. Given your committee position, Congresswoman, is the Pentagon prepared to quickly convert that to the kind of aircraft it needs to be trusted to transport the President of the United States?
I don't believe so. I look at the whole thing as a giant flying bug. I don't care if we get it for free. It poses real national security risk to our president, to our country. Listen, I'm traveling abroad this week for committee work, and the security precautions that I am taking just as a member of Congress, just to be gone for 9 days abroad, are very serious. I don't envision a world, put the Emoluments Clause to the side and Congress needing to approve these gifts. I don't envision a world in which that plane can be safe to carry our commander-in-chief. So, again, gravely concerned about this gift from an ally.
You mentioned the defense budget here. We're talking about the first ever $1 trillion budget for the Pentagon, Congresswoman. From your perch on the Armed Services Committee and the fact that you have the Naval Academy in your district, I know you're very close to this. The chair of your committee says this is not enough money to build the military capability that we need in this country, thinking about the Golden Dome, the F-47, more shipbuilding, unmanned technologies. Does he have a point?
I share Chairman Rogers' concerns about our readiness, particularly as we learn every day of the new threats of our adversaries, the capacities and capabilities of Russia and China and Iran. I mean, it would make anybody fearful and hyper-vigilant about the readiness of our troops. And so I enjoy that committee very much because we have serious bipartisan conversations about how to prepare our country and our military to be the best in the world. But again,
so how much money does the
deep
Pentagon
reservations.
need?
I don't have a number for that, but I have deep reservations with this Secretary of Defense to be able to spend, again, $1 more effectively. And I think my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would agree with me. We need more oversight, greater oversight from Congress on this defense spending. And unfortunately, with the unprecedented continuing resolution that the Congress just passed, we're actually diminishing our oversight capacity in defense, and that's gravely concerning as well.
Well, one of the areas in which the president would like to see defense money being routed is to the Golden Dome that Joe was just alluding to, Congresswoman, that he formally announced with Defense Secretary Hegseth yesterday, suggesting it would cost less than $200 billion. He thinks it can be done in 3 years. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you even think this is necessary for national security in the first place?
Well, certainly Secretary Hegseth has not brought himself in front of the House Armed Services Committee yet, so they have not sold their partners in Congress on this plan. I have no idea of the details beyond which was reported today, but, we need to be doing this in partnership. We are a co-equal branch of government. I've only been in Congress for about 130-ish days, and I got to tell you, the most concerning thing about this place so far is Congress has diminished responsibility. We have intentionally, certainly with the Republicans in charge now, we have rolled back our oversight capacity, our budgeting and appropriations capacity, responsibility to be that check and balance on the executive branch. And so I can't approve or disapprove of anything that, the Secretary and the President and this administration have not brought to their partners in Congress for a responsible conversation.
Well, you make an important point, this being your first term in Congress as one of the newest people in the building, Congresswoman. This is your first reconciliation process. Is this good for the country?
I would suggest that if you have to have a hearing like Rules has that starts at 1 a.m. in the dark of the night, that is not healthy for our republic. It's not healthy for public discourse. It's not healthy to make sure that our constituents can call our offices and share their opinions, and they provide that much needed check on us that our framers intended. So, no, I would not say, and the fact that we don't even have the final amendment yet, and yet the Speaker wants to bring this bill to the floor tonight, ridiculous.
We'll be watching for you in front of the Rules Committee a bit later on. Democratic Congresswoman Sarah Elfreth of Maryland, we thank you for joining our conversation here on Bloomberg. To some developing news now out of the Department of Justice tonight, important after the DOJ announced it would be moving to dismiss the Biden-era lawsuits and accountability agreements with the police departments of Louisville and Minneapolis.
Both cities, of course, garnered worldwide attention over the police killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, leading to precedent-setting action from the DOJ. The department will also be closing investigations into the police departments of Phoenix, Trenton, Memphis, Oklahoma City, and more.
The move comes as the DOJ shifts away from racial discrimination cases and law enforcement accountability, saying the investigations and lawsuits were part of a, quote, anti-police agenda. It also comes just days before Minneapolis marks 5 years since George Floyd's killing. Coming up, we'll continue our conversation on the tax and spending package here in Washington when we assembled our political panel next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The tax cut plan is going to be put out. In other words, we're going to get the tax cuts, and the bill, I think, will pass. Whether we get what we need, the bill will pass the Rules Committee. Now, the question is, will it pass on the floor? And it does not have the support to pass on the floor.
Republican Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina sharing whether or not he believes this tax package will pass a floor vote when he spoke with us a bit earlier today. Majority Leader Steve Scully says that vote will be held tonight, despite the Rules Committee still underway, as you can see live on Bloomberg TV now after over 16 hours of work. Joining us with their reaction now in real time, this evening's political panel. Megan Hayes, former special assistant to President Biden, our Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Lauren Tomlinson, principal at Cornerstone Public Affairs. Great to see you both here. This is happening before our eyes, Lauren. What is Steve Scalise thinking that we don't know about, that this could reach a floor vote tonight? They still have a lot of holdouts.
They do, but apparently the White House meeting went pretty well, where the White House presented a list of policy options and negotiating room that they would be comfortable with and wouldn't oppose if to give basically leadership and the House Freedom Caucus and those dissenters space to work out a deal. Ultimately, all Republicans want the same thing. They want this big, beautiful bill passed because they want Trump's 2017 tax cuts extended because, you know, otherwise it's a tax increase. You don't want a tax increase under Trump's watch because he campaigned on lowering taxes for people. So this will get done in some form or fashion because Republicans are very committed to getting it done and not letting Trump's campaign promise go to waste. How it will get done and the minutia of that is yet to be seen. But I mean, who knows? Maybe it'll be like speaker votes and they'll just hold them there and just keep running the votes until they force everybody's hand.
Well, and if we think back to the speaker vote, it required President Trump literally getting on the phone with members in the cloakroom to tell them, hey, you got to vote for Mike Johnson. We have now seen Trump yesterday on Capitol Hill, today having holdouts at the White House. He is heavily involved in this. Is failure or passage of this bill completely tied, essentially, to the argument of President Trump and the hold he has on the Republican Party?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you see a lot of these people who are bending to Trump and not bending to the constituents. But I think the other problem we have here, besides some of the actual policies in the bill that are just bad for the American people, like kicking 14 million people off their Medicaid, just simple things like that, they are making the House Republicans take a vote on something that is going to be gutted in the Senate, and it's not going to be the same bill when they get it back. And they are in danger of losing the majority of the Senate. Democrats are going to use this in ads. They are going to use this against them every step of the way. And so I don't understand the tactic here of why they are making them take a vote on this.
Interesting. Democrats are going to be making a lot of ads about Medicare, aren't they? Is that a concern of yours when you consider midterms?
Not too much, because I think that there's such a contrast right now with everything that's going on politically. You have the Biden book that came out and the fact that they'll be running ads about how Democrats lied. There's also the contrast that the Medicaid and Medicare cuts really focus in on illegal immigrants and increasing work requirements, two things that are generally pretty popular with folks. So I think that, yes, there will be ads and nobody likes their health care getting touched and entitlement spending. However, Republicans have really good contrast messaging. So if you make it against Americans and illegal immigrants accessing welfare benefits, that's a really hard contrast.
Well, but they aren't actually entitled to get Medicaid legally, except in emergency scenarios. This is a very small fraction of the budget we're actually talking about here. These measures that it seems are hills they're willing to die on, the things that they say they want in terms of substantive changes, should we really be describing them as things that are going to dramatically reduce the United States deficit?
No. And, you know, it's interesting because when I worked in the Senate, I worked for Saxe v. Chambliss and what they gang, you know, all the gangs, the Gang of Six. And they actually put forth a really responsible bipartisan spending and cuts plan that would have actually reduced the debt and deficit, would have balanced the budget. And you know what it required? It required no tax cuts. It required entitlement reform, not kicking people off, actual entitlement reform, and drastic spending cuts to defense, to everything. Basically, they did not leave anything untouched. It made everybody hurt. And that is the only way that we are truly going to fix this, is if Democrats have as much as Republicans to lose on every aspect of this and nobody gets what they want, that actually solves the budget issue.
Well, the fact is, during the campaign, the Republicans talked a lot about the overspending that they saw in the Biden administration. Debt and deficits mattered. I'm not sure what's happened since the election on that score, but do Democrats own this issue now?
No, I don't think so. I mean, when you put a budget forth that has $3 trillion added to the deficit and you are the party who owns all the power and in the Senate, the House and the White House, I don't know how you can put that back on the Democrats. I think they are making tax cuts for the wealthy 5%, and which is going to increase costs for the lower 40% of the people in this country, which is most of this people in the country in these battleground states that really matter to them. So the politics here is not adding up for them. They are trying to do something for Trump and his friends and their billionaire colleagues that is just not beneficial beneficial for the working class people in this country.
Well, President Trump, while he did spend a great deal of time today focused on this issue and his legislative agenda, he also spent hours with the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, who visited him in the Oval Office, in which the president actually showed a video of what he said is proof of persecution of white farmers in South Africa. He brought printouts as well. And Ramaphosa was asked essentially how he can convince Donald Trump that genocide is not happening in his country. This is what he said.
It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends, like those who are here. When we have talks between us on the around a quiet table, it will take President Trump to listen to them.
Megan, you obviously spent time in the Biden White House helping messaging and kind of thinking about things like this. What did you see orchestrated in the Oval today?
Well, I've sat in many of these bilateral conversations, not only in the Oval Office, but at these summits and abroad. And there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes here. They do a pool spray, that's what this part is what you see. And then they have a conversation in private. And so some of these conversations that he's choosing to do in public because it's a reality show for him, like insulting Zelensky and, this conversation here, this is just adding that America is not doing this in a diplomatic way. Clearly, there's more to this than meets the eye. There's been reports that Elon Musk is having a hard time getting Starlink purchased in South Africa. So I think that there is more to this that benefits probably some people in his administration more than it does this. But I just think this is so not representing the way we want to represent our country. And the diplomatic process here is broken. And it's embarrassing that they're treating the Oval Office like this in public.
Well, it certainly plays well with the MAGA crowd. Lauren, is the model broken here after what we've seen described as an ambush, in this case, the Zelensky example? Why would a world leader ever walk into the Oval Office?
I know. He's definitely putting them on the spot and making them answer a lot of questions that they don't want to answer. But to your point, MAGA base really likes this. They like the fighter in Donald Trump. They don't want to see the pomp and the circumstance that we've been accustomed to seeing in diplomatic conversations before.
Isn't this its own version of pomp and circumstance, though?
A little bit. There's a little bit of performance.
It's the Trump show, isn't it?
Yes, but I think that he is challenging world leaders, and in MAGA world, that's not no-toeing to Europe. That's not letting these foreign leaders come in and demand all of these things of the United States and not be held accountable for anything else that's going on in their own countries. I'm not saying that's what happened. That's what's happening in South Africa, but I am saying that there is an undercurrent of grassroots republicanism right now that really wants to see America not just hold water for everybody else in the world and be challenging to others to step up and address issues that are going on in their own country.
There also is the question of the white Afrikaners who the U.S. is now accepting as refugees because of what this administration alleges is genocide. I know the White House views its arguments as being winning on a lot of these immigration and issues around those who are allowed to come to the United States. But do you see this as a winning one for them, Lauren, when we aren't accepting, for example, Afghans who worked with us during the war as refugees right now?
I'm not sure, but I do think that the revisiting of all of the visas and who we're giving visas to is a winning message, because they want to make sure that we're shifting from a heavy asylum system, so not getting to vet and choose people who are coming to this country, and move them towards a more normalize what other countries do, which is put them through a refugee process. Slight difference. It's either they're already in the country when they're applying versus refugees who are out of the country. But they do see that type of shift in immigration policy as a winning issue, which means that they can focus on giving visas who they believe will contribute to the economy, high-value visas, high-value contributors, instead of just the flood in which we're seeing at this point of people who are abusing the asylum system.
This came up in a hearing with Marco Rubio. Tim Kaine, Democratic senator from Virginia, asked him if Afrikaner farmers are the most persecuted group in the world. Are we getting an appropriate answer to that?
I don't think so, and I also don't think that the American people are paying attention to this. I don't think most people are even understanding what's going on here at all. And I think to your earlier question about are world leaders going to come to the Oval, I think the answer is going to be no. They're going to go to other countries for the support that the United States was giving them, much like Justin Sink, your reporter, was saying earlier. We're pushing people in the hands of China. So I think, where the American people are not paying attention to this, people should start paying attention, because we are pushing other countries away from us instead of bringing people in like we used to.
All right, Megan Hayes and Lauren Tomlinson, our political panel this evening, thank you so much. And we'll be back for more straight ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons. It is nearly 6 p.m. on the East Coast, and the House Rules Committee is about to go into its 17th hour considering this massive budget reconciliation bill. The House leadership is still telling us a full floor vote on that legislation could happen tonight, but a few things still need to happen first. We need the manager's amendment with whatever changes the speaker has agreed to with the various factions here, and it still has to get through rules before it can go to the floor.
Rules Committee, where people are dozing off here after all of this time. If you've been with us over the course of this hour, and even on the early edition of Balance of Power, you know there are great concerns. We talked to Ralph Norman. He's not prepared to vote yes, as he made clear to us here, Kaylee, at least on the floor. And there are many others where he came from. So we'll keep tabs on this for you and invite you to check out the Washington Edition newsletter. There's a lot to catch up on, both on the terminal and online. We'll tackle this again tomorrow when we get back together. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power. With Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg.